You continue to sleep in the same place, but the presence no longer holds weight. The bed has turned into neutral territory. The touch has lost its intention. The silence has become more truthful than any word. The conversation exists, but it isn't happening. The routine goes on, but nothing is being built. The responses come, but they lack soul. The attention, forced, absent, distant. And all of this is noticeable. It's in the automatic gestures, in the lack of pause between one word and another, in the way the eyes divert, in the hurry to end the moment. Someone is by your side, but no one is with you. Have you ever wondered how long it's been since the connection was broken, or if it ever truly existed? Because what exists now is just coexistence, without roots, without depth, without truth. And no matter how much the physical presence remains, the emotional absence has filled all the space. You can feel it in the tense body, in the cold touch, in the effort to maintain the basics, in the desire to be anywhere but here. It's no longer exchange, it's tolerance. It's no longer desire, it's exhaustion. It's no longer sharing, it's a burden. You still call it a relationship, but what remains is merely a habit. And even so, you still stay. You stay trying not to confront the truth. You stay trying to normalize the emptiness. You stay pretending everything is fine, to avoid losing the little that still exists. But deep down, you know that this us can't hold anymore. You know that what was presence has turned into disguised absence. You know that you're alone, even when accompanied. You walk through the door. You place the keys in the same spot. You carry out the gestures. Smile with your lips, but the soul no longer follows. You do everything as you always did, but without truth, without intention, without connection. What used to be a gesture of care has turned into an obligation. What used to be closeness has become discomfort, and the absence begins to become noticeable in the details that only silence reveals, in the lack of sparkle in the eyes, in the rush to finish any topic. In an attempt to disguise the discomfort with small gestures that no longer support anything. There is no more bond, only a disguised bond. Only the effort to maintain an appearance that protects both from facing what has already been lost. You are still in the same environment, but everything about you feels distant. You're on your phone. You're caught up in problems you don't share. You're in the exhaustion you don't vocalize. You're anywhere but here. And even without words, everything screams. It screams in the way the touch has faded. It screams in how the body stiffens at the slightest gesture of affection. It screams in the forced sigh after each attempt at closeness. It's almost like sleeping next to a stranger with the same features as before, with the same scent, but with a different presence, or perhaps with none at all. To stay is no longer to be. To respond is no longer to communicate. To coexist is no longer to share, but still it persists, out of fear, out of attachment, out of exhaustion, or just because the idea of starting over feels more frightening than the emptiness that lingers. Coexistence becomes cold, exchange turns into routine, and emotional absence becomes the new normal. Yet the body feels, even when the mind tries to rationalize, even when the rhetoric insists that everything is fine, and the heart notices. It notices in the nights that end in silence. It notices in the looks that are avoided. It notices in the words that sound rehearsed, repeated, devoid of spirit. It realizes that the relationship, once alive, now breathes on emotional life support. And that weighs heavy. It weighs to wake up next to someone who no longer cares. It weighs to pretend not to notice the distance. It weighs to keep giving love where only automatic presence is received. It weighs not having someone to share the pain of being alone. And still, you don't leave. Still, hope persists. Maybe it will change. Maybe it will return. Maybe it will get better. But deep down you know it won't, because those who have already left internally rarely come back. Those who have already emotionally withdrawn rarely reconnect, and those who have stopped noticing the other rarely start to see again. It's no longer about a crisis, not a phase, not a lack of time. It's about an end, but an end that no one has had the courage to admit. An end that still goes by the name of a relationship, But that in practice is already an absence disguised as routine. You try to strike up a conversation, but all you get in return is distraction. You suggest going out, but the excuse of being tired comes up. You show affection, but the response is cold, dry, evasive. It's like dancing alone, like exposing yourself to someone who no longer feels affected by anything. And the soul feels it. It feels the unspoken abandonment. It feels the silence that drags on between one good night and the next. It feels that, even if the body remains, the bond has been gone for a long time. It's this kind of loneliness that hurts the most. The shared loneliness. The loneliness of being together, but not truly being with each other anymore. And this doesn't start suddenly. It happens little by little. A touch that doesn't happen. A conversation that doesn't deepen. An affection that starts to be avoided. A distance that grows without explanation, until everything becomes absence. And all that's left is the effort to pretend that it's still worth trying. But the body has already noticed, the intuition has already screamed, and the heart already knows. It knows that there's no turning back, that the bond has been broken without words, that the abandonment occurred even before any goodbye. There are no fights, no arguments, no slamming doors. Just an absence that has accumulated, an absence that has stopped being temporary and has become an identity. And those still trying to hold it all together notice. They notice that the other no longer sees. They notice that the words don't touch. They notice that presence no longer translates into connection, and yet still insist, out of fear of being alone, out of remembrance of what was, or just out of habit. But the emotional absence is already so clear that loneliness seems more sincere than any attempt to keep what has already died. It's not just the other who has gone, it's you too. It went away little by little. It faded. It adapted to the emptiness like someone learning to breathe in places without air. You tried to hold on. You tried to sustain it with small gestures, with long waits, with sweet words that never came back. You tried to balance absence with forced presence. You tried to be whole where there was only half. And in that attempt, you got lost. You silenced yourself to avoid provoking. You diminished yourself to avoid scaring. You shaped yourself to what was left, hoping to save what no longer wanted to be saved. But no one can bear being the only one keeping alive a body that doesn't respond. No one should get used to emotional crumbs, to compliments of convenience, to promises that only delay the end. The problem was never the lack of love, it was the imbalance, it was the lack of reciprocity. It was the one-sided effort that sooner or later wears you out, and you got tired. Even if you won't admit it, even if you still cling to what could have been, even if you keep telling yourself that it will get better one day. Deep down, the truth has already knocked. There's nothing more to insist on. When the other person's gaze no longer seeks you, when the touch has lost its intention, when the words become excuses, absence no longer needs an explanation. It reveals itself in everything. It becomes noticeable, even in the simplest gestures. And the heart feels. Even if the mind tries to deceive itself, even if the longing for what once was creates illusions, even if the fear of starting over keeps you stuck where it hurts. But there is no cure where there is no presence. You can convince yourself that it's just a phase. You can keep pretending that it's still worth it. You can repeat the same rituals every day. But the body knows, the soul perceives, and time shows. It shows that what you call love is just fear, is just attachment, is just an attempt to avoid facing what is truly missing, yourself. You know that. You feel that. And perhaps you've tried to hide this discomfort with distractions, with justifications, with that hope that persists even after the other has given up. But there comes a time when it gets exhausting. It's exhausting to smile alone. It's exhausting to try to brighten up an empty space. It's exhausting to give what the other has stopped valuing. It's exhausting to pretend that everything is fine when nothing makes sense anymore. And even when you're tired, you stay. Because leaving takes courage. Because the silence after the end seems scarier than the noise of absence within the relationship. Because sometimes the pain of staying feels less painful than the pain of leaving. But none of these pains compare to the pain of not being seen. The pain of giving yourself completely to someone who is no longer willing to receive. The pain of looking to the side and finding a body present but a soul absent. The pain of realizing that the love that still lives within you has already died in the other. When the attempts cease, when the body gives up struggling, when the heart stops beating for the other and starts pulsating for itself, something changes. Not suddenly, not with fireworks, but with a clarity that burns. The clarity that it wasn't love. It was attachment. That it wasn't partnership. It was an escape from oneself. That it wasn't connection. It was need being fed by emotional scraps. And when this realization hits, there's no going back. No more accepting crumbs. No more pretending that love is alive. No more continuing to play a role where the story no longer exists. This realization doesn't bring immediate relief. It brings pain. It brings emptiness. It brings grief for something that was never whole, but that you tried to make real. Yet, in time, this grief transforms into liberation. It becomes space. It becomes clean silence. It becomes strength, rising from the depths of the fall. Because when the attempt dies, the truth is born, and with it comes something almost no one teaches: the courage to choose yourself. Choosing yourself isn't saying enough out of anger. It's saying enough with awareness. It's leaving without noise, without an audience, without long explanations. It's about closing the door with the calm of someone who finally realizes that being together is not the same as not being alone. Because loneliness in a relationship destroys, it quietly eats away. And you've learned this the hard way, in the lost gaze, in the embrace that lacks presence, in the frustrated attempt to make someone feel what they stopped feeling a long time ago. And no matter how much the other keeps saying, "I love you," out of convenience, you feel, you perceive, and that's enough. Enough not to beg. Enough not to diminish yourself. Enough not to beg for a place where your worth isn't recognized. From this point on, there's no turning back. There's movement. There's detachment. There's finally being present with yourself. But this only comes after the pain of seeing, after accepting the end, after the unromantic mourning for what was tried to be held onto for love, and which was only kept out of fear. And when that fear yields, when the realization sets in, when the soul finally understands that being alone is not synonymous with absence, but with clean space, the cycle closes and you understand it wasn't about the other. It never was. It was about the neediness you projected, about the love you wanted to feel, about the giving you did, expecting something in return. But it only left you empty. You gave too much to someone who could no longer receive. You wanted for two. You sustained what no longer had a foundation, and now you retreat, not out of weakness, but out of clarity. Because after everything ends, after the bond unravels in silence, after the bodies go on with their empty routines, there's something even harder to face. What's left in you, not of the other, not of the relationship, but of you. After accommodating too much, staying quiet, offering too much, there are remnants left. There are doubts left. There are scars that can't be seen in the mirror, but that change how you walk, how you feel, how you touch. There's a version of you that got used to being ignored, that learned to accept little, that normalized absence as if it were a sufficient presence. And that version is the one that needs to be faced now, because it's not enough to walk away. It's not enough to turn the page. It's not enough to say it's over. If the wound is still open, if the perception is still stifled, if the emptiness continues to echo even after the end, the greatest absence at its core was never the other person. It was yours. It was you who set yourself aside to hold on to someone who had already left. It was you who ignored your own warnings, your limits, your intuition. It was you who kept trying even after realizing that the other person no longer saw you, and now it's time to start over. But not that fresh start that everyone talks about on social media, not the cliché of loving yourself first wrapped in self-help platitudes. It's the real restart, raw, lonely, silent, the kind where you wake up and there are no messages, where you dine alone, where your phone doesn't ring, and no one is asking if you made it home okay. It's in that space that you re-emerge, because it's there at the end of the illusion that your true presence is born. And it doesn't come with joy, it comes with anguish. Yes, it comes with longing, indeed. It comes with days when you wish you could turn back time, just to numb yourself, But only by crossing this desert do you stop accepting less than you deserve. Because now you know. You know how it hurts to be ignored by someone who claimed to love you. You know how heavy it is to insist on someone who no longer sees you. You know how it slowly destroys you to cling to dead ties. And you know, most importantly, that no one can give you back the time you spent diminishing yourself. But you also know no one can stop what comes next. So here's the question. Who are you going to be now? The one who hides to avoid inconveniencing others? The one who accepts anything just to avoid being alone? The person who repeats patterns out of fear of facing the void? Or someone who learned to realize that the pain of losing yourself will never be greater than the pain of abandoning yourself? Because true liberation never comes from the end of a relationship. It comes from the moment you choose to return. But not to the other person. Return to yourself. Return with open wounds, with exposed traumas, with pieces in hand, but return whole. Even if shattered, if you've made it this far, it's not by chance. Some part of you recognized every word, because this absence we feel, even when someone is by our side, is more common than one might think, yet hardly anyone talks about it. And maybe it's time to stop pretending it doesn't hurt. Stop settling for less. Stop calling what deep down is just endurance love. Now you know, being together is not the same as being present. Recognizing this is the first step to not losing yourself anymore. So here's what you should do. Comment below, what was the moment you realized someone was no longer really with you? Share your experience. Someone needs to read what you have to say. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the upcoming content. Here every video is a mirror. And there's always more coming. Hit like if this message touched you. It's simple, but it shows that this kind of conversation needs to continue. And share this video with someone you know who is living this silent absence. Someone still trying to save what once was. Someone who needs to stop abandoning themselves to keep someone close. Because this conversation doesn't end here, and you know that.